We all are studying a very beautiful text, Amritabindu Upanishad. The first Mangala Charana Shloka is a prayer of all the seekers to different deities of the universe. So let us chant Mangala Charana, beautiful prayer. Om Bhadram Karnebhi Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai Stushtabhagam Sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vruddhashavaha Swasti na Pusha Vishvavedaha Swasti nastaksho Arishtanemi Swasti no Brihaspatiradadhatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. In our Vedic culture, it is always a right action or a tradition to remember the Lord before starting any of our morning, afternoon, or evening different actions of the day. Why is it so? Because have this attitude that this action is for him and him alone. So in this Upanishad, as we are now studying, the first shloka, let us chant the first three shlokas. Manohi dvividham proktam Shuddham cha shuddhameva cha Ashuddham kama sankalpaha Shuddham kama vivarjitam. Mantra number 2. Manayeva manushyanam Karanam bandha mokshayoho Bandhaya vishaya saktam Muktam nirvishayam smrutam. Mantra number 3. Yato nirvishayasyasya Manaso muktirishyate Ato nirvishayam nityam Manakaryam mumukshunam. Here, a direct instruction is given to all the seekers of the truth. What is the instruction? Instruction is Ataha, therefore, for whom mumukshunam, for all the seekers of the truth. What they have to do? Nityam nirvishayam manam karyam. All the seekers of the truth constantly should try to renounce or to remove all the sense objects from the mind. That means to make our mind free of sense objects. So that is our task in hand. Here, our instruction from the Upanishad is, to all of us, the instruction is, what is the instruction? First, focus on your center point of life. What is the center point of life? Center point of life is our mind. Center point of our life is our mind. And this mind is responsible for the whole bhavana. Bhavana means whatever our quality of the mind, we all can develop or we all can groom. So that is very important aspect. When we do not have the association of satsanga, when we do not have right association, what happens? We develop wrong notions because all people around us, they have some or other thing as a pre-notions of the mind, and those pre-notions of the mind slowly occupies our own mind too. Because what is association? Because association of all the people, those who all have a different wrong notions about n number of things. Now, therefore, this is must what? Satsanga with a teacher, one who is well versed in Shastra, one who has studied the Shastra, the scriptures in Guru Parampara tradition. So these are the very important aspects of taking up this path of knowledge towards the supreme goal of reality. So here, instruction one has to be very clear about. My constant effort should be to remove all the sense object from my mind. Now, it is a very hard task, no doubt about it. But please do not put a label of impossible or difficult. If we put this label to the task in hand, then the whole energy absolutely gets drained, because the mind becomes negative. The mind becomes very disturbed because it says, no, 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 it is not possible. Let me just do something else. So this sort of very different atmosphere or a quality or sort of mind's, what I can say, mind's nature becomes very different. Therefore, it should be very clear that what I want in life. Please note, there should be clarity. What I exactly want in my life and why do I want it? Two questions. What I want in my life and why do I want it? So if a person is a seeker of the truth, then he knows what I want in life. What he wants or she wants, the supreme reality, the supreme truth, the Bhagavan. Why do I want it? Because this person has done enough now discrimination, called as he has used his power of discrimination, that's called as viveka, to understand the reality of the whole world. The reality of the whole world. Through the scriptural study, this person has understood there is nothing which is permanent in this whole world. Nothing is permanent. And if there is nothing permanent, no object is permanent or can be permanent. No situation is permanent or no situation can be permanent, as well as no person who is physically existing on this earth is permanent or can be permanent. It is not possible. Therefore, when this person understands this subtle point, that if I want a permanent happiness and remove all the sorrows from my life, then what is the solution for it? Then the solution is given by our scriptures. What is that? Purify your own mind. This is the direct solution given by our scriptures. It's an injunction. That means it is a direct message to all the seekers. What? Purify your mind. Oh, do I have to purify my mind? But I don't know that what is impurity. Oh dear, impurity is all sort of desires for the sense object. So what is the impurity? Vishaya asakti. That means that mind which is too much attached to the sense object. That is the impurity. So what is the purity? That mind which is free from all the attachment to the world of object. So in the second mantra, Upanishad gives us this indication. The mind is under the bondage because of this attachment to the sense object. And it is possible that if you do a right effort, you can remove all those attachments because they are all acquired ones. They are not permanent. It is not the nature of the mind to have continuous attachment and remain attached forever. That's not the nature. And therefore, it is possible to remove all those attachments towards the sense objects of the world. And that itself is a liberation. So in the third verse, Bhagavan has beautifully indicated, Veda Bhagavan, what is that? Yato nirvishayasyasya mano muktirishyati. So that person whose mind is free of all the sense object, that itself is liberation. And therefore, all the seekers have to continuously strive to remove all these sense objects from the mind. Now, a beautiful next step which our Upanishads are indicating to all of us. Mantra number 4. Nirasta Vishaya Sangam Sanniruddham Manorudhi. Nirasta Vishaya Sangam Sanniruddham Manorudhi. Yada yatyatmano bhavam. Yada yatyatmano bhavam. Tada tatparamam padam. Tada tatparamam padam. To reach to that supreme padam, the supreme abode of the reality, the truth, the supreme abode of the Bhagavan, what is required? Then it is said, Nirasta Vishaya Sangam. Having renounced all the Vishayas, that means complete attachment to the sense objects of this world are given up, completely given up. Then what? Then when the mind is under well controlled, when the mind is well controlled, where? In the heart. Hridayi, in the heart. We will explain it elaborately. When the mind will control in the heart, then what? Then that mind, it obtains the nature of the self. Tada atmanah bhavaha apnoti. That means at that moment it obtains the nature of the self, then it is said that is Paramam Padam. That is the state of supreme reality. That is the abode of supreme truth. So one by one now, let us take up what indication or direct message is given to all of us by the Amritabindu Upanishad. First step for all the seekers, Nirasta Vishaya Sangam. One must renounce all the sense objects of the world. That means attachment to the sense object of the world. Vishaya Sangam Nirastham. Sangha is that which is called as attachment here. So one must give up all the attachment to the sense object. Please understand. Then having done this, what is the next step? Then mind should be in such a complete total control. And that total control said here is when the mind is total control in the heart. And that's called as a total control. Then the next step is said here. If your mind is under total control in the heart, then what is the next state? The next state is that mind which is well under control in the heart obtains directly the nature of the self. And that is the supreme abode. So these are the few important steps given by the Upanishad to all of us to attain the supreme truth. Now let us analyze one by one for our sadhana, what is called as spiritual practice. Ask this question: how one can renounce the attachment to all the sense object? How can it is be said like something which is an object, and this object I have to give up, so just throw it and then that's all? Is this the case with the sense object? No. Sense object are not directly sitting in our mind. Please note, sense objects are not directly sitting, they are not sitting in our mind at all. Then what is the presence of sense object? Now this point one has to be very clear about. The presence of sense object in our mind is the desire for the sense object. Is the desire for sense object. Now please note it. Is the desire for the sense object, is this the nature of the mind? Is this a permanent nature of the mind? So the direct answer is no. That's not the permanent nature of the mind. How do you say so? Now please note again, because there is such a condition where we all remain there without any disturbance, with complete peace and completely at rest. And that state is called as deep sleep state, where the mind actually is at a single form. You can say the mind is absent there. And that time, there is a supreme peace. There is complete relax. There is complete, what is called as, the whole system is completely relaxed. Think about it. Yes, it is. And there is no external pressure or there is no stress to BMI, body, mind, and intellect. Why? Because they are all actually disconnected. They are all actually disconnected. They are into a still form, as though. So, one must know now what exactly is a mind. This analysis is also required. So, when mind we take it up and to analyze it, we require the scriptural, our lot of knowledge. So mind in a sthula form, that is called as in a gross form, nothing but this whole world. How is it so? Because when the mind is in waking stage, and that mind which does not have a background of scriptural knowledge, then the mind is full of objects, actually full of desire for the objects and objects alone. Think about it. Yes, it's a fact. And that's the actually the quality of the mind when there is no when there is no understanding of the scriptural knowledge. Now, what is the sukshma, called as the subtle nature of the mind? The subtle nature of the mind of whom? Of an ignorant person is what? Is thoughts of all the sense object, desires of all the sense object. So what is a subtle quality of the mind? Desires of all the sense object. What is the gross quality of the mind? The mind itself becomes the world, because all those so-called as objects of the world, they come and sit in our mind as though. This as though word to be understood. So this is the state of the mind. So just imagine when one person has to reach to the deep sleep state, then what is a requirement? Renounce all first object which you are holding on to, literally. So give up all the objects, whatever. If you are having a conversation with someone on the phone, so you have to just stop it, put it off, and just renounce it for some time. This is one. If there is a TV which is going on, just put it off. Then if there's a music going on, put it off. If you're talking to someone, just end the conversation. If there is too much of light, put off the light. Then what do? Having renounced all the gadgets and the objects of the world, I have to just lie down with one thought in the mind. What? Let us sleep. What's the thought? Just sleep, sleep, and sleep is the only thought. Now there is only one thought which takes us all away from the mind. Why? Because that state of deep sleep is devoid of objects, devoid of mind and intellect. Similarly, it is said here, when that mind which is pure, please understand, that mind which is pure. Now please understand, we all know now what is called as pure mind. That mind which does not have desires about the sense objects. That is called as the pure mind. Such mind is very easily can be placed in the heart. Now, this heart is not the physical heart, but this is a spiritual heart. So, in commentary of Amritabindu Upanishad, Pujya Guruji Swami Tejomayananji writes beautifully, page number 23 of the Upanishad, Amritabindu Upanishad book. He says, physically, head and the heart may have a separate location, but the locus of the mind with all its thought is centered in the self. But the locus of the mind with all its thought is centered in the self. The spiritual heart within. This is called as a spiritual heart. Actually, what exactly it means? That means the self is called as the spiritual heart. The place where we experience I in the purest form, free from all the thoughts. So when there are no thoughts in the mind, that mind itself actually is directly connected to the self and takes the form of the self. Now, I have to just say it takes the form of the self. Please do not imagine that the self has some form like that of the ball or bat or something like that of the tree or something like that of the animal. There is no such form. The self is absolutely formless. But to convey the message, I used this word which is called as form. So the mind takes up that form completely. Let us give an example. When the river is having a floods, then the water of the river is completely muddy and you cannot see the bottom of the river, that is called as river bed. So what is now the solution? Let all that muddy waters go away. It will take lot of time. How it is possible? Then and there, when the rain stops, and there is no water which is flowing now from the hills to the river. So then what happens? Slowly that mud which is coming from the hills to the river gets slowly washed away by the waters of the river. And one time it comes, now there is no mud in the river waters at all. And there is nothing called as furiousness to the waters. The water is very smoothly moving towards its goal. At that moment, if you look at the river as though it is still, Now, at that moment, when you look at the waters of the river, you can directly see the river bed. Similarly, when we stop all such objects which are continuously flowing towards the mind through our sense object, because of the desires of this sense object, and therefore there is a impurity in the mind. So slowly, when a seeker of the truth knows the fact that I have to renounce all these desires about the objects. Now, what is indicated beautifully in Bhagavad Gita. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanne atmana tushtah sthita prajnastaduchyate. Now just look at this verse where Bhagavan is telling, when someone renounces all the desires about all the objects from the mind, that mind atmane atmani tushta. That means that mind completely rests in the self, or that mind gets completely connected to the self, and that mind itself is the self now. Why? Because mind is only mind when there are thoughts and desires about the object. Please note this, that mind devoid of desire and object is called as no mind, as that of the deep sleep state. Hope this point is clear in your mind about the manaha rudhi stitaha. How the mind is completely resting in one's own heart. That means that mind has taken so much pure form that it is not different than the self. This is called as that mind which is well under control in the heart. That movement, the nature of that mind is like that of the self alone. And that is the supreme abode of the Lord. What a beautiful message to every one of us. Swamiji, can you please once again tell us? The message is direct. What? Unless and until we throw away, we give up all the desires about this sense object, there cannot be a purity of the mind. First point. If there is no purity of the mind, then that mind cannot be under well control at all. Think. If the mind is not under control, that means that mind is going away through all our senses and connecting to all the sense objects. Then as though these all objects are coming and sitting in our mind and occupying all the space of the mind. That's the seat. If we don't give up this desire about the sense objects. But one who slowly understands and take up a spiritual sadhana. Now please understand, the spiritual sadhanas are, Puja Guruji has mentioned in the third verse, what are the spiritual sadhanas can be done? That is in page number 20. He says, preliminary sadhanas that can be practiced by beginners are worship, called as puja, japa, called as mantra, name of the Lord, namasmaranam, sankirtanam, then sacrifice, ritualistic sacrifice called as yajna, charity called as dana, austerity called as tapa. So all these are sadhanas. A person should understand what best sadhana suits me. Please understand. Because a seeker has to be very sensitive. Now what I am using a word, very sensitive, not sentimental. Please note it. Sentimental means what? Where there is a mind which is too much emotional or too much weak, and if it does not get what it wants quickly, then it gets disturbed off and on. That's called as sentimental mind. But the sensitive mind understands that the supreme goal is the highest goal of the universe, of the life. Then highest sacrifice is required for it. And it will take lot of time, because the mind which is today impure is not because of just yesterday's my actions. My mind got impure because of n number of births, wrong actions. And therefore, it will take sufficient long time to completely get purified. For that, I should have that much of patience, determination, and that intense desire for the liberation. Then it is possible. Please understand, it is possible. Why? Because n number of people have achieved it. That's the point one must be clear about. That n number of our great teachers, great saints, sages have achieved. Now both points are important to understand. People, those who have walked on this path of bhakti yoga, they have also attained. But where is and what is understanding? They have this understanding, those who are walking on the path of bhakti, that everything which is there is nothing but the Lord and Lord alone. Now this is the bhavana, called as the complete understanding of the bhakta, the devotee. Whereas a jnani, a seeker of the truth, a mumukshu, he or she understands the whole world to be mithya. And there is nothing other than the self. So, a path is to be selected as per our own quality of the mind. And having understood this fact, one who removes all the desires of this sense object and make one's own mind absolutely free of all the desires of the sense object, makes it completely pure, that mind rests in the self. Now please understand, the next shlok which is coming up is very direct. I am asking you one question to reflect upon. What is the question now? When the mind is well controlled in the heart and it obtains the nature of the self, what it actually called as? The question is, what then this state actually called as? I will just give you some hours to reflect and think about it, because tomorrow we will be directly discussing this topic. So, having beautifully analyzed about the mind, about the quality of the mind, about the connection of the sense object and the mind, and what is actually mind from the gross standpoint as well as from the subtle standpoint. Having understood, we can now very clearly visualize. Please understand what I'm saying. We can Clearly visualize that state, that how the mind can rest completely in the self. For that, let us contemplate for a few minutes, wherever you are. Sit firmly, give command to your body. No movement for few moments, for few minutes. If you're wearing a spectacle, you can remove it. Close your eyes gently. Let your facial expressions be pleasant. Let us focus on our breathing process for a minute to gain a good concentration. Let us focus the mind's attention to the discussion of today's class. Today, Upanishad is giving us this indication that one who can renounce all the objects, one who can renounce all the attachments to the sense objects of this world, to this person, the mind will remain completely under control. This well-controlled mind in the heart, that which is a spiritual heart, itself obtain the nature of the self. How is it? So we have taken one example of river waters. When the water was muddy, we can't see the bottom of the river bed. But when all the dirt of that waters is completely washed away, then there is a state where the waters are crystal clear, without any dirt, without any mud particle. And there is no furious nature to such waters. It appears as though the river water is still. Then such moments, when you look at the river, you can directly see the river bed. Similarly, the mind, devoid of the desires of the sense object, becomes completely pure, and that complete pure mind is so transparent, then the effulgence of the self alone is experience. You can bring your hands to the Namaskar position. Have gratitude towards Almighty Lord for giving us this beautiful knowledge and the time. Have gratitude towards one and all around us. Let us pray to everyone, for everyone in this world. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah. Sarve santu niramaya. You can rub your hands together, create nice warmth. Put both hands on both your eyes. Give a nice massage. Bring back both your hands in Namaskar position. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.